Hello everybody, it's Jay Roby. I'm going to be taking a look at the Sicilian defense in this video, in particular the Najdorf variation. And we're going to take a look at one of White's strongest lines in this, and this is the English attack. And it happens when White plays bishop to e3 on move 6. But we'll get to that soon. Now the Sicilian defense is one of my most requested videos that I get, and it's one of the strongest defenses that Black has at its disposal to a king's pawn opening. Now the defense itself scores a 35% win percentage for White, a 37% win percentage for Black, and a 28% draw. Now, while those numbers won't really have any influence on your personal games, they do really show that when you add Black's win percentage to the draw percentage, that this is one of the strongest defenses that Black has at its disposal. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Sicilian defense, it starts out like this. White's going to play the king's pawn out to e4, and now Black is going to play the pawn up to c5. So this is a Sicilian defense. Now, this immediate push to c5 from Black does a couple of things. First of all, it stakes out control of a key central square, d4. Now, in addition to this, Black, by doing so, also prevents White from utilizing the e and d pawns together to gain a strong center. So this is a very good move from Black. Now, the book lines continue. White plays knight out to f3, and Black now is going to play pawn up to d6, and White now plays d4. Now, the reason why White wants to play d4 in this position is because of two factors. Number one, it opens up space for White, and number two, it opens up lines. So basically, White gains a little bit more space, opens up some lines for the bishops, and basically says, okay, you can have one of my center pawns for your c pawn, but in return, I'm going to get some quick development. So Black goes ahead and captures. Now, Black definitely wants to capture in this position. Even though it gives White more space and opens up some lines for White, Black gets some key things in return. First of all, Black gains the open c file. And generally in the Sicilian defense, a lot of the attacks from Black come on the queen side. Now, this isn't always the case, but most of the variations have the queen side activity for Black. Secondly, however, though, Black has now been able to trade the c-pawn for one of White's central pawns, and in return, as you can see, Black still has its center pawns to use to push for center control later on in the game. So that is very important for Black. So Black definitely goes ahead and captures in this position. Now White's going to recapture with a knight, and Black's going to develop knight now to f6, attacking the unprotected pawn on e4, and White's going to reply now knight to c3 to defend that pawn, and now Black is going to play a6. So we're getting into the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian defense. Now, pawn to a6 does a couple things. First of all, it blocks the check from the bishop coming down to b5, and it also prepares for a queenside initiative from Black. Now, it should be noted that in some variations, an immediate pawn to e5 has been played in this position. Now, eventually the pawn is going to want to go to e6 or e5, but an immediate e5 in this position lands a check from the bishop on b5, and Black doesn't have a lot of great responses. Black can block with the knight on both of these squares, or even the bishop, but the resulting lines that follow tend to favor White. So it's best just to go out after knight to c3 with an a6 from Black. So get right into the Najdorf. Now, from here, White's going to play bishop to e3. So this is the English attack that I was referring to earlier. So on move 6, White plays bishop to e3. Now, this line tends to favor White the most. So if you're a White player and your opponent has just played a6, bishop to e3 is leading into one of the most solid optional lines for White. Now, I should take a moment, though, and say that instead of playing bishop to e3 first, White also has the option of playing the pawn up to f3. Now, the reason you'd want to play pawn up to f3 is to block Black from moving the knight up to g4 for quite a while. But both are strong moves. You can play an immediate bishop to e3, or if you want to prevent that knight from coming down to g4 right off the bat, you can play pawn to f3 to do so. For this video, though, we're just going to take a look at the main book line, which has the bishop immediately coming out to e3. Now, from this position, since Black has prevented the bishop from coming down to deliver check on b5, Black can now freely play pawn up to e5, attacking the knight. White's going to retreat the knight over to b3, and black now is going to place the bishop onto e6. So it's a very nice active bishop in this position because it's not only attacking the knight, but it also has access to go to the other side of the board if required. Now white's going to take the opportunity to play f3, so not only strengthening the pawn on e4, but also preventing the knight now from coming to g4. So a good move from white in this position. Black continues development with bishop to e7, and now white is going to play queen up to d2. Further strengthening this dark square bishop on this diagonal and also maintaining presence along this file. From here, black castles. Now white is going to castle long, so you can see that the pressure that white has along this file is mounting. And currently this pawn is being defended by black's bishop and queen, but this definitely could be a future weakness for black, and it's something that black is going to have to watch out for. So from here now, black plays knight up to d7, and white now plays pawn to g4. And you'll notice now that black's light square bishop is starting to get a little hemmed in. It doesn't have any access along this side of the board anymore, and these two squares are taken from it as well. So really the only current option that it has would be to capture the knight on b3. And you'll also notice that white's pawn structure is kind of like a stonewall structure in that we have the pawn on f3 kind of supporting the pawns on g4 and e4. So from this position, black plays pawn up now to b5, and white, instead of maintaining this, actually pushes the pawn down, attacking the knight on f6. Black returns by playing pawn up to b4, attacking white's knight. Now instead of capturing, white retreats the knight to e2, and black also retreats the knight to e8. And from here, white brings the pawn up now to f4. And black really doesn't want to capture here, because if black takes the pawn on f4, white can simply recapture with the bishop and gain a whole bunch of control of the center. So instead, black plays the pawn up to a5. And from this position here, it's actually dead equal in terms of positional strength. And this is the end of the book line, the primary book line for the Najdorf variation in terms of the English attack move by white with bishop to e3. Now, the Najdorf itself has other variations that I'm going to get into in future videos, but I wanted to cover this one first because it's one of the stronger responses from white. So I'm looking forward to your feedback on that, whether you played the Najdorf yourself or you've tried the English attack against the Najdorf. So take care, hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.